Today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search specializes in helping small firms in Texas hire lawyers and build great teams. Teams like Joe Biden pulled together in about 48 hours after South Carolina, those types of teams. So if you are thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. And before we get into this episode, I do want to remind you that Varsity Search has been retained by a construction law boutique in Dallas to help grow their team. This is a tremendous opportunity for an 8 to 12 year partner level attorney, as well as a 3 to 6 year associate attorney. And these are on the litigation side. Now, they are well compensated positions that provide a lot of client interaction and responsibility. So if you or someone you know might be interested, please email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com, or contact me on LinkedIn. Also, a quick reminder that our latest movie verdicts episode is in your feed right now. We did Witness for the Prosecution. And a quick heads up that our next one will feature the 2017 biopic Marshall, referring to former Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, starring Chadwick Boseman. And Robert Callahan and I get into some challenging conversations about race and equality under the law, while, of course, giving out our awards and appreciating this well-made movie that, honestly, more people need to see. So check it out if you haven't already. It's free on Amazon Prime right now, and you can also, of course, rent it on other streaming services as well. Okay, today is another Monday Mentors episode, and we are privileged to be joined by James Rainey. I've worked with James and his wife, Elisa, for a number of years, as together they formed the elder law boutique firm Rainey, which is right down the street from me here in Waco, though they recently expanded with a new office in Georgetown. James focuses on probate and fiduciary litigation, and I'm excited to talk with him today. So let's jump into our conversation with James Rainey on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. All right, James Rainey joins us now. James, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. How are you, Daniel?
I'm doing fantastic. And, I mentioned a few things just in introducing you earlier, but I'd like to just give you an opportunity to share a little bit about your firm and what you guys have going on there. It's an exciting time for you. It's not, we were just talking before we hopped on about how busy you guys were. So tell us a little bit about the firm and what's going on.
Yeah, so we are an elder law firm. Our practice caters largely to elderly, probably 65 and older, and their adult children. We do everything from planning, Medicaid for nursing homes and trying to protect assets so that individuals don't have to spend their life savings on a nursing home.
Right.
We do regular wills and trusts and power of attorneys. We do probates and guardianships and everything in between. And we've been very blessed, being very busy doing that work. And then it's compounded right now because we're opening an office in Georgetown. Yeah. And so it's amazing all the things you got to try to do to open a new office.
Right. Well, that's exciting. And I want to hear about the Georgetown office for sure, but kind of backing off a little bit or backing up a little bit, maybe share with us a little bit about how you got into the practice area to begin with, and how that came about. Because I know that there are younger lawyers out there that are starting to kind of figure out maybe which niche area that they would want to go in. I'm curious how you discovered this one, and tell us about that.
Yeah, my practice used to be a litigation practice,
right,
and had a very successful litigation practice. And then my wife and I became partners probably about 15 years ago, and she really wanted to do elder law, estate planning, and probate type work. And so we kind of came up with a business plan, and we started trying to seek that kind of work. And we've slowly grown our practice over the last 15 years to be a boutique law firm here in Waco. I think it did kind of help at the time that we had both practiced for 10 years and had made a lot of connections. So that did help us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of the last thing I want to ask you about in terms of just the practice area is what's kind of going on in the practice area of elder law, estate planning, Medicaid. What's if you go to the CLE conference on these issues and practice areas, what are some of the hot button topics that you guys are paying attention to at your firm?
Well, this is an area of law that the rules change every couple of years. So they always change in all the areas of law, but in particular in elder law, because the legislature decides, we need to cut this benefit. We need to add this benefit, or we need to change this. If the tax laws get changed, that affects estate planning. So that is one hot button, is we have to keep up with lots of changes. And then another thing that kind of, is kind of a hot button issue right now is in our area, it's becoming inundated with non-lawyers competing in our field, practicing law, even though they're not attorneys. We've got certified senior advisors that are giving advice. We have financial advisors giving legal advice. We have accountants and bankers giving legal advice. And then we have people who used to work for Medicaid, and they go out and become consultants. This area, hot button issue right now is the illegal practice of law. What can be done about it, if anything, when you go to some of these conferences, because they're everywhere, and you're trying, so that's really a big issue right now.
That makes sense, and it sort of dovetails with something we talked about a couple of weeks ago on the show with how some states are starting to go to basically issuing kind of a lower level of licensure to allow folks to give very limited types of legal advice. I would imagine this area would be one of them where that could come into play. And so that definitely makes sense, and something to be watching out for, both from the current state of illegal practice of unauthorized practice of law, and then also what might be coming in terms of additional licensure opportunities that might be out there for folks at some point down the line that aren't lawyers, and what that means to the legal profession, right?
Right. And, that's something we hope doesn't happen.
Sure.
it would be a disservice to our Texas residents for that to happen.
Right. As we think about maybe what some of the younger lawyers in the audience, who makes up our audience here, are going through and thinking about maybe in their first few years of practice. I'm going to take you back there as well to when you were kind of in those initial years of practice. What's something that you learned in those first few years, just in terms of being a lawyer, that has stayed with you and has served you well as maybe a habit or just a way of doing things that has served you well and has helped you in your career?
I think one thing that I've learned over time and back in the beginning is having a good assistant, a good secretary or legal assistant, and working with them, communicating with them and working with them is probably something that stands out as very important, both as a young attorney and as a senior attorney. I think that is something that I think is often overlooked by lawyers.
Right.
To me, that's something that's very important.
Yeah. How did you find that to be helpful in your practice as you developed? What are some of the things of value that brought you and took maybe off your plate or helped you to become a better lawyer?
Well, I mean, it helps in one respect. You can't return every single phone call. You can't draft every single letter. And when you try to do all of it, you don't get to it.
Right.
And so if you have a good assistant that can take some of that off your plate, I think you give just general better service, customer service to the client, which then frees you up to dedicate your time to the more important cases, the one that require a little bit more research or a little bit more attention. And so I think that's very important.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as we've talked about in the past here, and it's common, I think, for lawyers to know that the number one complaint that lawyers deal with from clients is the lack of communication, right? So not being able to return all those calls, and part of that is what you're talking about.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you can have an assistant who can return some of those calls and just give them just a quick update or just a quick answer to their question, they're generally happy, and you can move on to the next project.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I want to ask you about, as you've over the years had associates that have worked for you, and maybe even back to when you were working alongside other lawyers kind of as a peer, what's something that maybe a thing or two that associates can do to create a positive impression with you as as their supervisor, as their partner that they're working for? What stands out to you?
I think a couple of things. Your traditional be on time, get there on time. Don't come rolling in at 10 in the morning. Be there at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Be ready to work, and be willing to accept new challenges. Don't complain, or don't be like, oh, really? Do I have to? Always have a positive attitude about wanting to do it. And then I would say, going one step further, it really impresses me, and I think other lawyers with associates, is the associate who can make a good relationship with you and realize how you like to do things and can start taking the initiative. So when you start to say, hey, Daniel, we need to take a look at this, they're saying, I'm already working on it,
Yeah.
Or they come in and say, hey, I know you usually like to do this. Do you want me to start on that? Or I thought maybe this might be a good way to approach it, and start suggesting things that might be new or novel. I think those are the kinds of things that really impress me and senior lawyers.
Yeah. No, absolutely. On the flip side of that, what's something that you have found to be maybe either annoying or something that associates do that just maybe they don't even realize it, but it just puts it shines a negative light on them?
Yeah, I think one thing that's kind of key is if you're doing a project or you're working for a lawyer and they give you feedback that you don't like, that it isn't obvious you don't like it. So I think you need to take feedback and in stride and learn from it and go make changes and then come back with a little bit more initiative and more suggestions. I think you make a negative impression when you're not willing to work, or when you're not willing to take a little bit of criticism, constructive criticism, or suggestions, and you think that comes across a little negatively. So I think that's something younger associates need to try to avoid. Sure.
Yeah. No. And I think something that we I think try to share here too is when lawyers take the time to provide advice or provide feedback, it's because if that's you in this case, because you care about their development, you want them to get better. It's not to be personal critic or whatever, but it's to build them up, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, when attorneys they are never in their mind criticizing the younger attorney. Unfortunately, the younger attorney occasionally takes it as criticism, and the other attorney is not. It doesn't come across. They don't for a second think they're criticizing. They're trying to teach you. They're trying to build you up. They're trying to make sure that you do it right next time. And so I think that not getting your feelings hurt and not taking it as criticism is really important. And to answer your question too, Daniel, I think just the old traditional things, being late to work, not creating a good rapport with the staff, are things too that can create negative impressions with the other attorneys. You need to be on time, you need to be present, and you need to get along with the staff.
Talk about that a little bit, because that's one that has come up before. We haven't spent as much time on it here, and I'd like to talk about that in terms of working with whether it's paralegals, assistants, support staff. How have you seen that play out in maybe either a positive or a negative light with especially younger associates, oftentimes working with people that are older than them and may actually know a little bit more than them at that stage in their career just because they've done stuff in the law firm or environment?
Yeah. So a young lawyer starting right out, especially in a traditional model, you go to college, you go to law school, and then you come out and you start practicing law. You do not have experience in adulting, working, being a professional, and so you need to come in and learn some of those things. You need to learn them from the lawyers, but you also need to learn them from the staff, especially if they've been around. And occasionally you might have a staff person who's equally as new as you, but how you treat them is very important. You've got to make sure that you're helping them develop while you develop. And I think if you have I know of occasions where associates at some bigger firms maybe weren't quite so respectful or polite or creating a good environment with the staff, and their supervisors took notice of that. Yeah.
No, I think it's a trap that young associates can walk into and maybe not even realize they're doing it. Because it's not.
I'm the attorney, right? I'm the one who went to law school. I know what I'm doing. Well, yes, but there's still things you can learn, and you need to help other people learn too.
Right. Yeah. No. And there's definitely still a just a basic way of being decent in how you treat people, right?
I think that's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. As you go through the process of hiring an associate onto your team at your firm, starting with maybe just in terms of screening, whether that be resumes or cover letters, writing samples, whatever you like to look at, what's a couple things that you are looking for that stand out from a positive standpoint, and what are maybe a couple things that sort of raise either yellow or red flags that you're maybe either eliminating or really kind of putting in the probably not category?
So two things that I think are real important is that you read the posting or the job ad for the job you are applying for, you want, and you do what it asks, because often we'll ask for a resume and a cover letter, and then we'll have a bunch of lawyers send in just resumes and no cover letter.
Right.
And those resumes get set aside and don't even get looked at. Because that tells us that you don't really pay attention to the detail, or it tells us you're not really interested in the job. And so look at the ad, look at the posting, and do what it asks you to do. If it's asked for a cover letter, make a cover letter. If it asks you to prepare, a list of references, do it. Because there's a reason they put it in the ad. The second thing is, when you write a cover letter and you prepare a resume, make sure it overall has a good appearance, and that it is grammatically correct and that the punctuation is correct. Have 3 or 4 people proofread those for you before you submit them anywhere. It is surprising resumes or cover letters we'll get from law students or attorneys that will have misspelled word or a sentence that's not grammatically correct, or the overall picture looking at the resume just isn't very professional looking. And so those are some things that I think really are important. And when a reviewer is going through resume after resume, if yours stands out, if has a nice appearance, it's grammatically correct, you've submitted the cover letter like you were requested to, it's going to get closer consideration.
Yeah. It is amazing how many application materials come through or get tossed out because of mistakes. And I'll just say, to echo what you said, because I think it's so important, is to have other people review it in addition to yourself. I mean, I don't know about for you, James, but for me, I will absolutely, even if it's just a 1-page document, I can read it and look over it a number of times and still miss, just that one letter that's out of place. It's not something Word's going to catch because it's as instead of is, or is instead of as, and for whatever reason, my mind is just tricking me into thinking it's in the right spot, and someone else has to catch it for me. It's just the way it goes.
All the time. Absolutely right. Truly, I have to set it aside and come back and look at it later. Otherwise, I won't see a glaring error if I just worked on it.
Absolutely. And it can be very obvious, and you just won't do it. Your mind is just messing with you. So definitely encourage everyone to do that. That's great advice. Okay. So if they get through the kind of screening phase, they've had a resume that is, grammatically correct, and they have obeyed the instructions in the job posting and all that. They get to an interview. And now, what are a couple things that you're really honing in on in the interview to try to determine whether they aren't just maybe a finalist, but they're actually the right person for the job?
That's a very tricky question to answer, because I'll just tell you, after years, I've hired a couple, 3 or 4 associates over the years. I've hired lots of legal assistants. And when you're young and applying for the job, you think the person in front of you has something very in particular they're looking for, and they know what they want, and you're trying to, fit what you hope they think. But I'm here to tell you that it's not that way. What we're looking for is someone that's a good fit, somebody who has a good attitude, somebody we think that's going to fit in with the attorneys and with the staff. We're looking for that. So we want them to have a good attitude, and we want them to have a good demeanor. Of course, we want them to have a reasonably good track record with grades and past experiences. And we want them to show an interest. A question I ask everyone is, what did you do to prepare for today's interview? And I'm hoping they say, well, I looked at your website. I looked at what you were practicing. I did a little bit of research on elder law to make sure I knew what it was, or I took those classes so I know what you do. I talked to the law school, and I know that you guys teach this class, and I know this is what you've done. And so something to show that they're interested in the field and interested in particular in what we do is kind of what we're looking for when we ask questions like that. So interest in what we do, good appearance, and something that, kind of convince us that they're a good fit for our firm. Yeah.
I'll bet that question gets a few people. I bet you.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised. People, well, I don't know. I signed up at the Career Development Center, right?
Oh no, none of them would have done that. No, at least not while I was there.
Right.
They'd have been better prepared, hopefully, than that. Do you find any nuggets in the questions that the candidates ask you in the interview?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes no, but sometimes you'll have questions from the candidates, and the questions that are really particularly good are ones that are focusing in on what we do, and and make sure that's something they're interested in. So, how we do things, what does this look like? What kind of clients do we have? Those are good questions, because it shows that they really are trying to make sure they're a good fit for us is equally important.
Right. If a candidate is, maybe, especially I'm thinking about for a practice like yours, which is more niche, and I imagine most, lawyers that have been out maybe 3, 5, 7 years probably haven't done specifically what you guys are doing, but then they get to a point in their career where they're wanting to make some type of change, and that's an area that they're now interested in pursuing. Maybe they've just done general litigation, or maybe they've done general transactional work, or whatever it might be. How do you kind of evaluate them, or what advice might you have for them in trying to make that transition in terms of within an interview setting, trying to convince you that they're that they can make that kind of a transition, that they're really interested in it, or is it something that they have to have done from year one coming out, really to kind of be a viable person to consider?
No, I don't necessarily think that it's something that they've had to done since year one. I think if someone's wanting to make a career change and they're wanting to get into a different field, whether it's what we do or even a completely different field at a different type of law firm, I think they need to come in with the idea that I want to make this change, and here's why. And here's what I understand it's going to take some work to get up to speed. and have already maybe done some research of what they could do to get up to speed, and talk to the lawyer and say, I'm willing to go to this seminar. I'm willing, I've already purchased this particular book that's authoritative, that's important in this field.
Yeah.
I've already done, these are things I'm willing to do, and whatever else you can tell me to do, I'm willing to do it to get up to speed so I can be competent in this new area.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that's really what they need to do. Like for us, when we were hiring a lawyer for Georgetown just recently, we had a couple of people who were wanting to make career changes, and we were open to that.
Yeah.
I would say though, when you're changing fields, your expectations have to be reasonable, because if you're a big-time general litigator for a company or a big law firm, if you're trying to change into estate planning or elder law or something more niche-based in a smaller market, the monies and the economies are very different.
Right.
So you need to be aware of that too, going into it. We met with one guy who submitted a resume and a cover letter, and he had not really been prepared for the difference. He was general counsel in charge of litigation for a large national company. And now he's applying for a job in Georgetown, Texas, doing elder law and estate planning.
Yeah.
It's a very different, work model, and it's a very different economy model too.
Right.
So you got to always consider all those things when you're trying to make a career change. All that has to be weighed into the equation.
That makes sense. And yeah, I can see how that might happen. As associates start to, learn their craft, become good lawyers, I know some of them start to have, if they don't already, have, sort of a goal of either becoming a partner in the law firm that they're working in, or maybe starting their own practice at some point, which of course means that they do have to, at some point, start to develop their own clients and their own business. How would you advise, a young lawyer to start just maybe thinking about business development, client development, and how to start kind of, setting the stage for their own practice or their own, becoming a partner at some point in a firm?
Yeah. So if they're in a firm and they want to kind of work into some sort of situation where they're a partner, or where they might share in profits that they bring in, or share in profits of the firm in some way, because there's all kinds of new models now.
Right.
The traditional, you work for 6 years, 7 years and become a partner still exists, but there are plenty of other ways that you can make quite a bit of money and share with the law firm now that exist. But to get there, you certainly have to get involved in the community, and get involved in the industry that you practice in.
Right.
And so whatever that might be, if you're an intellectual property attorney, you're going to need to get involved in things that are associated with that industry. If you're a corporate attorney at a big firm, or, you're going to need to get involved in those industry circles, associations. If you want to do elder law, it's the same. And you need to visit with your supervising attorneys at a firm and say, I have an interest in earning a percentage, or becoming a partner, or doing something over the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
How can I work towards that goal? And, and I think you develop a plan with someone to get to where you want to go. Right. And talk to them about, what's a good way to develop more clients. When you're, especially for that firm, I think it's really important that you don't come off or give the impression that you're wanting to leave and go take clients, or
yes,
you're not spending
right.
your time trying to develop clients for a future practice on your own and not for the firm, because then you're doing a disservice to your firm.
Right.
But you could certainly, doing things like working with your partner's clients, making sure that they get really good service, and then talking to your partner and saying, I know we're really overloaded. I was wondering about talking to so-and-so at this company and seeing if they know other companies that could use our services. Call them, then call that company, go talk to them, and get the first company to make a recommendation. Then suddenly you become the point of contact for the firm. Things like that can really make a difference in building up your book of business, your clientele, the money that you bring in. And if you're very transparent with the other attorneys, there should be a model that you can work towards participating some way in some profits.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I think, look, I think sometimes younger lawyers are afraid to have those conversations, not sure how it's going to come across, whatever. I think you made a good point about being transparent and, very above board about, what you're wanting to do and not, like you said, looking to leave or take clients. But also, I mean, if I'm you, James or Elisa, in your firm or a partner, especially in a smaller firm, I mean, to me, it's a compliment and should feel good that a younger associate who's maybe worked with you for a couple of years, 3 years, sees a long-term vision there and a plan there and wants to be part of it. I mean, that's exciting. That's what you want, I would think. And so...
Yes, I think that's exactly right. That's what we want. I mean, we have 2 different associates, and our goal is to work with them so that they can make more money over the years and be here for a long time. Absolutely. Yeah. There's no question about it, because then it's kind of a win-win situation.
Right.
Right. Now, I will tell you, I think sometimes young lawyers lose track of some very important matters of reality, in particular economy type matters. If you don't want to work a lot, you can't really demand or expect to make a lot. Right. I mean, it's been that way since the beginning of time.
Right.
So I'm at sometimes bar meetings or other places, and you'll hear young lawyers talk about, well, we want a more flexible schedule. We want to be able to leave middle afternoon. We want to be able to sit around on our electronics for 2 hours and then go back to work. They want like a Google type environment in the law office.
Right.
And if you want that and you get that, there's got to be a trade-off. You have to make enough money as an associate attorney or even as a person sharing in profits of some way, or a partner, to pay for yourself, your expenses, your staff, your education, make a profit for the firm, and then start sharing.
Right.
And I think young lawyers lose track of that sometimes. I don't want to work very much, but I expect to get paid a lot of money. And it's always been a problem from the beginning of time, I'm sure. But I really do see that. And I think that's influenced a lot by companies like Google, who have ping pong tables set up for their computer programs. And, and those kids stop programming and go play ping pong for an hour and a half, and then they go back to programming. Right. But they're just getting paid a straight salary to produce software in a certain time frame that's going to make them billions of dollars. It's different in a service. It's different in a service industry.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think there's definitely limitations on it, not just the law, on any service, client service industry, with what you can do with that. And then I do think there's sort of sometimes a confusion between what's a flexible schedule and what's just time off.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Because, I mean, if you're working 50 hours in a traditional week, whatever that might be, 8 to 6 or something like that, then a flexible schedule is still 50 hours. It's just maybe it's 8 to 4, you go home, you eat dinner, see the kids, and then work again from 8 till midnight. Okay, that's a flexible schedule. It may not work in every firm because of the structure of the client type or whatever, but that's a flexible schedule. Yeah, but taking just time off and not ever doing that time back is not a flexible schedule. That's just less hours.
I think you're exactly right. I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, that is exactly right. One of our attorneys does take off a little bit early, two days a week, but she makes up that time at home and on the weekends. She works a 50-hour work week, and but she ranges her schedule so that she can get it all done and still be off early on 2 days. But some of these young lawyers seem to think, oh no, I want to get off at 3, and then they don't realize, well, if you still want to get paid that same salary or more, you still got to work and generate the revenue to pay for you, right?
Yep, absolutely. So for the record, then, Rainey does offer flexible work schedules as properly defined.
Correct.
As properly
defined. Correct. That is correct.
Well, we're near the end of our time, and I just want to say thank you for being with us, James. It's been great to hear your thoughts and great stuff that you've shared. Is there anything, before we get to our few rapid fire questions here at the end, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to share with the audience, or anything that we've just barely touched on or missed?
No, I don't think so. I think we've had a nice conversation.
Well, good. I agree, and I appreciate it. All right. Rapid fire questions. Are you ready to go? One word, one phrase answers for these quick ones?
Let's do it.
All right. What is one trait or characteristic you most want to see in an associate?
Practicality.
Practicality. All right. What habit has been key to your success?
Hard work.
Favorite app or productivity tool?
I don't have one. That's I don't have one.
You don't have?
No.
Your new earbuds that we just found for this podcast.
That's right.
And the most important question of the day: favorite legal movie?
My Cousin Vinny.
Oh man, that is becoming the runaway favorite.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, it should be. It should be.
Well, so. If you haven't had a chance yet, so Robert Callahan and I are doing legal movie breakdowns on this show every now and then. And My Cousin Vinny was the first one that we did. It's a favorite of ours, and it seems to be a favorite of the people we're visiting with here. So you're in good company with that pick. So, well, James, again, thank you for taking the time. Hi to Elisa and to everyone at your firm. We are fans of you guys. So thanks for coming on the show.
Of course. Thank you, Daniel.
All right, my thanks again to James Rainey for joining us on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And also, would you tell your friends and colleagues in the Texas legal community about the show so we can serve as many of you as possible? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, please email me directly, daniel@varsitysearch.com. All right, last reminder to not forget movie verdicts. Robert Callahan and me, we're breaking down Witness for the Prosecution in your feed right now. And looking ahead to the next one that we will put out there for you is Marshall. So if you haven't seen that, please put it on your list to watch over the next week or two. All right, I want to thank each and every one of you for listening to the show today. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we will talk to you next time.